In the same spirit as the reference 5531 that we presented in 2017, the minute repeater, world time, with the particularity that the minute repeater is driven by the local time of the world time mechanism. This year, 2022, I'm pleased to present to you the new complication, which brings together for the first time two emblematic Patek Philippe complications, the annual calendar and the local time known as travel time. The particularity of this piece is that the annual calendar is entirely driven and controlled by the local time of the travel time complication. I'm now pleased to invite you to watch the technical video that has been produced for this new complication. Thank you. Here is our new Calatrava 5326G, combining for the first time two very useful functions: annual calendar, travel time. The particularity of this two-in-one mechanism is that the annual calendar function is controlled by local time, forward or backward, when the time zone is set. In terms of the display, the local hour and minutes hands are solid and luminescent as is traditional, while the home time hand is pierced. The dial features two day-night indicators for local time and home time, along with a small seconds display at 6 o'clock. For the calendar part, the date appears through an aperture at 6 o'clock, the day of the week and the month side by side at 12 o'clock, and finally the moon phase display at 6 o'clock, coaxial with these small seconds. The watch functions are governed by a three-position crown. Position 1 enables movement winding. Position 2, forward or backward local time adjustments in 1 hour increments. And position 3, time setting of the three hands. And finally, the watch is equipped with 4 correctors: a month corrector at 2 o'clock, a date corrector at 4 o'clock, a moon phase corrector at 8 o'clock, and a day of the week corrector at 10 o'clock. Here is our 5326G Calatrava in white gold, with a 41mm diameter, equipped with our self-winding base caliber 31260 PS, beating at a frequency of 4 Hz. The dial is charcoal grey with a black gradient rim, featuring a grainy texture reminiscent of vintage cameras. The entire circumference of the caseband is adorned with a clou de Paris hobnail pattern, and this is achieved by attaching the lugs to the case back. We will discover the assembly of this particular case a little later, in a video dedicated to this process. The watch is equipped with a main strap in nubuck textured beige calfskin, and an additional black calfskin strap with an embossed fabric finish, both secured by a fold-over white gold clasp. This design has been picked up on the case and dial of reference 5226G, with a smaller 40mm diameter, equipped with a caliber 26-330 SC. The three-part case construction, bezel, caseband and caseback, is distinguished by the fact that the lugs are attached to the caseback to allow the clou de Paris hobnail pattern to run around the entire caseband circumference. To make the watch as thin as possible, we used a box-type sapphire crystal, i.e. one that is curved on the dial side, in order to integrate the hand fitting as much as possible into the curved space of the crystal so as to create an even greater impression of slenderness. The white gold hands, featuring a beige luminescent coating that is also present on the hour markers, recall the color of the transfer as well as that of the main strap. This is the first time that a beige luminescent coating has been used. The dial is textured with a grainy charcoal grey galvanic decoration with a black gradient rim. The caseback reveals the 31260 PS movement that we first launched in 2021 with reference 5236p, an inline perpetual calendar model equipped with a platinum mini rotor. The inspiration behind this case is reference 5531 for the clou de Paris hobnail pattern on the caseband, but the inspiration stops there. Let's take a closer look at this new 31260 PS QA LU FUS 24-hour movement, referred to as the QA, annual calendar travel time. Further improving useful complications, we wanted to bring together two popular complications, namely the annual calendar time and travel time, distinguished by the fact of having annual calendar time driven by local time, known as travel time. This can be done forward or backward, whether for 30 or 31-day months. Thanks to this ultra-thin base movement measuring just 2.6 millimeters thick, we have a complete movement with all its functions that is only 5.6 millimeters thick altogether. On the dial side, the annual calendar mechanism, driven by the travel time local time mechanism. We can see the 6 discs beneath which the innovative functions of this new caliber operate. We can see the partially toothed wheel that drives the 24-hour wheels and accelerates the date jump time. The month lever with 2 bulges serving to move the date forward and backward. The local hour wheel that is lighter to reduce the inertial delta with home time, as well as our new 3-position time-setting mechanism. Through the case back, we can see exactly the same base caliber 31-260 PS with platinum mini rotor. Before going into the functioning of our new annual calendar adapted to our dual time zone function, let's look at the operation of our current or existing annual calendar. By way of a reminder, an annual calendar takes into account the duration of months with 30 and 31 days and requires only one correction per year, on March 1st. As far as the date is concerned, it all begins with the hour wheel, which performs one full turn in 12 hours. By means of a gear ratio, the wheel driving the date fingerpiece makes one revolution in 24 hours. A set of 2 fingerpieces set at an angle to each other is driven by a pin embedded into this wheel. Each day the lower fingerpiece comes into contact with one tooth of the date wheel and moves it one step forward, meaning by one day. On the 30th of the months April, June, September and November, the month lever comes into play, palpating the month cam to obtain the information regarding the number of days of the current month. For 30-day months, the jump is made by means of the upper fingerpiece, which drives the additional tooth of the month lever to perform the jump from the 30th to the 31st. And 2 hours later, the lower fingerpiece affects the daily transition as usual. For months with 31 days, the feeler spindle of the month lever, nicknamed the dolphin, is lodged in a notch, meaning that the upper fingerpiece does not come into contact with the tooth of the month lever and that the passage does not take place. 2 hours later, the lower fingerpiece advances the date wheel by 1 day, moving the disc from the 30th to the 31st. The next day, the same lower fingerpiece will advance the date wheel by 1 day to the following month. Let's now take a look at the operation of the calendar of our caliber 31-260 PS-QA-FUS. We chose to take as a base movement caliber 31-260 PS-QL, equipped with a platinum mini rotor, released in 2021 as part of our reference 5236P inline perpetual calendar. With this caliber, our objective was to create an ultra-thin annual calendar travel time watch with a dual-time display and small seconds at 6 o'clock. In addition, we adapted the entire time-setting system with a 3-position winding stem instead of the pushers at 8 and 10 o'clock for setting the local time. The hour wheel system has been adapted to integrate the dual-time function and the accelerated display jump function, which we will see in more detail later. And finally, the additional module of the inline perpetual calendar has been replaced by an additional annual calendar module semi-integrated into the main plate. Let's now take a detailed look at the operation of this new annual calendar driven by the local hour hand. Like the existing annual calendar, we start from the hour wheel. But this time we have 2 superposed hour wheels, one for home time and the other for local time. It is the local time hour wheel that drives the annual calendar. The cam on the local time hour wheel meshes with the date drive wheel via an accelerating cam that we will explain later. This date drive wheel thus performs one turn in 24 hours and has a double fingerpiece driven into it. The upper fingerpiece helps skip the extra day for 30-day months, while the lower fingerpiece performs one jump per day, just like the historical annual calendar. However, we note that the month lever now has two bulges, enabling the date wheel to be moved forward and backward around midnight during a time change following the transition to another time zone. In order to allow a backward movement at the end of the month, from 31 to 30 for 30-day months, a spring had to be added to keep the month lever pressed against the month cam at all times. To minimize the energy consumption due to this spring, the profile of the month cam has been optimized with a smoother, rounded shape, enabling the lever to consume less energy during the climbs into the bulges on the cam. The main plate of the base movement has been modified to recenter the stem inside the watch for aesthetic purposes. In addition, for this caliber, the time-setting mechanism has been modified from 2 to 3 positions in order to integrate forward and backward adjustment of local time. The choice of a 3-position crown to set the travel time instead of the 2 pushers at 8 and 10 o'clock is both practical from the user's point of view as well as aesthetically pleasing, since it serves to maintain a sleek design for the caseband of a Calatrava-type case. Moreover, the Clou de Paris hobnail pattern all around the circumference of the case middle confirmed our choice, since pushers would have interrupted this guilloche motif. To achieve this, we have changed the function of the 2-position stem of caliber 31-260 PSQL to a 3-position function for this new caliber. We have maintained and adapted the time-setting part. In order to keep the movement slim, we have placed the lever acting on the sliding pinion beneath the latter, thereby achieving reduced thickness. The pull-out piece has an additional patented fingerpiece, which, in position 2, when setting the local time hand, slows the inertia of the date disc to avoid a double jump. An additional lever carrying 3 intermediate wheels has been added. These intermediate wheels are only used during adjustments and thus do not use energy unnecessarily. Moreover, an additional groove in the lever has been specially designed in order to position the lever precisely by means of a pin attached to the pull-out piece. This ensures that the appropriate intermediate wheels are activated according to the position of the pin. Since the dual-time model is a traveler's watch, we synchronize the date with the local time hour hand, a particularly useful feature in moving the date backwards when traveling from east to west. From a technical standpoint, the challenge was to find a way to go forward and backward while maintaining synchronization and making the correction easy and pleasant for the user. Our traditional date mechanism, linked to the local time hand, enabled forwards-only time zone transitions. However, for the backward movement of the date, since the dolphin tooth had already gone past, backward movement was impossible and caused a desynchronization of the calendar. To achieve this, we have patented the addition of a tooth to the month lever. One tooth thus acts to move the date forward from the 30th to the 31st for 30-day months, while the other enables one to move the date backward from the 31st to the 30th for 30-day months. Let's take a concrete example. It is 1840 on April 30th in Tokyo. We take off for Los Angeles. We switch from UTC +9 to UTC -7, daylight saving time in LA. The flight time is 10 hours and 10 minutes. During the flight, the day indication jumps at midnight. The date starts to move at 00:05 and jumps from the 30th to the 31st at 0130. It jumps from the 31st, there is no 31st in April, to May 1st at 0155. The time continues to advance until the landing at 0450 Tokyo time. However, once on the ground on American soil, our watch indicates May 1st, since the jumps have been made. But in Los Angeles, which is now our local time, we are still on April 30th. Therefore, by forming a local time setting operation in position 2 and moving our local time hour hand back 16 hours, we find ourselves again at 1250 on April 30th. This 3-position winding stem mechanism enables the intermediate wheels to be used only when making corrections. The groove in the pull-out piece jumper spring enables the system to be locked in each selected position. Thanks to the new design of the annual calendar, the duration of all the jumps in the calendar is halved from 3.5 hours to 1 hour and 15 minutes. The acceleration of the passage of the finger pieces through the toothing of the 31-day wheel is made possible by a partially toothed hour wheel. This meant that the energy consumption of our new annual calendar associated with the dual time zone mechanism generated a significant increase in torque. By way of a reminder, torque is the force that acts on a toothing multiplied by its perpendicular distance. Our torque was increased by a factor of 6. It was hence necessary to rethink the dual-time mechanism to make it reliable and robust. We therefore adapted the dual-time mechanism. In order to better understand these changes, let's first look at how our historical dual-time mechanism works. In normal operation, the two superimposed hour wheels work together at the same pace, thanks to a connection made by a pull and its spring. When correcting the local time hand, the lower hour wheel turns clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on the selected pusher, and the pull will lift off the toothing of the star wheel, which is attached to the home time hour wheel, and thus allows the lower hour wheel to rotate.
Qui est solidaire de la roue des heures du domicile et permet ainsi la rotation de la roue des heures inférieures.
However, with increased torque, the stronger spring could damage the pull due to the force it must exert. To make it more reliable, we have redesigned the spring and pull system and replaced it with a robust one-piece spring and pull with increased torque.
Pour le remplacer par un ressort cliquet monobloc robuste avec un couple augmenté.
Moreover, its symmetry enables both forward and backward motion with the same torque. Now let's look at the advantages of our partially toothed wheel. The partial toothing covers about 1/4 of its circumference. The toothed part is therefore in operation for 3 out of 12 hours. For the remaining 9 hours, the 24-hour wheels are at a standstill because they are not engaged by our partially toothed wheel. During the 3 hours when the partially toothed wheel is in operation, the 24-hour wheels rotate 180 degrees, but do not interact with the day and date wheels around noon. And around midnight, the partially toothed wheel interacts with the 24-hour wheels when the second 180-degree rotation is complete. This partially toothed wheel has 2 advantages. The first is to reduce the time required for display changes. The second is to obtain a direct connection that improves the efficiency of the going train between the hour wheel and the 24-hour wheels. The fact that the latter is smaller results in a reduced size. Now let's talk about the inertial delta. On the left, the multiple accelerations of the pull dropping into the tooth of the time zone star wheel without the inertial delta, i.e. without the weight difference between the 2 sets of components. On the right, the multiple accelerations are compensated by the weight differences of the 2 elements and suppress the effect of the inertia, causing the gain or loss of the minute's hand. In this picture, we can see the date jump acceleration mechanism without the calendar plate, providing a clearer view of the partially toothed wheel fitted on top of the local time wheel, and which meshes twice a day with the 24-hour wheels controlling the date jump as well as the day of the week jump. The transition time is thus 5 times faster, since the date jump lasts just 18 minutes instead of 90. The partially toothed wheel meshes with the 24-hour wheels for 3 hours, around noon and midnight. The rest of the time, the 24-hour wheels are inactive. Around midnight, the fingerpieces of the 24-hour wheels interact with the day's star wheel and the date wheel, and thus make the display jump. This mechanism shortens the jump time by a factor of 5, dropping from 1.5 hours to 18 minutes. Let's remember that our month scale and its cam are only useful in 30-day months. To be able to adjust the date forward, but especially backward during a 30-day month of 30 days, we have modified the month scale by adding a second tooth. The first tooth serves to jump from the 30th to the 31st for 30-day months. To facilitate travel from east to west, the addition of the second tooth serves to return from the 31st to the 30th when adjusting the local time backward for 30-day months. To be able to drive the date reliably by the local hour wheel, we had to increase the torque between the local time hour wheel and the home time hour wheel. To achieve this, we had to reinforce the time zone jumper spring, while also making its movement linear, so that the torque used when changing local time forward and backward remains the same. This lever has 2 functions. When it is released, it holds the day disc jumper spring off its star wheel and thus enables it to take up its place. Once the lever is engaged, it releases the jumper spring and keeps the disc well above. The mechanisms are thus independent of the dial when it comes to keeping the moving parts at the required height. Each change of time zone via the crown causes tiny shocks between local time and home time. These repeated impacts cause the cannon pinion at the end of the going train to slide on its arbor, thereby causing a gain or loss in time, mainly visible on the minutes hand. Avoiding these tiny shifts required reducing the inertia of local time so that the tiny shocks do not have any influence on time discrepancies. This inertial delta was calculated by our numerical simulation instruments. To avoid any double jump of the date in local time adjustment mode, around midnight, the second spring is wound via the pull-out piece when the stem is pulled out to position 2, i.e. in local time setting mode. If adjustments are made during the month, day and moon correctors, the fact of being able to adjust the date forward or backward obliged us to have flexible correctors so as not to break the components if corrections are made during an unfavorable time window. For this new movement, we have developed 8 patterns. Time setting with 3 crown positions, forward-backward mechanism for the annual calendar, linear time zone spring, 2 patterns for the pivotable holding bridge, inertial delta, braking mechanism for the date disc when a correction is made, flexible correctors.